Thanks for the introduction. Thanks, Gordon, too. Did he disappear on me? For bringing us all here together today. I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation over the next few days. It's already been interesting. I want to start by asking you a question. What is rural? There's Gordon. Gordon, I said thank you to you while you were out of the room. What is rural? Shout it out. What's that word mean to you?
250 people.
250 people. Wow. Places less than 250 people. Anybody else want to shout it out?
Let's go for unincorporated.
Unincorporated.
Outside city limits.
Outside city limits.
Let's go for all of BC without the lower neighbor.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, great answers. Our U.S. Department of Agriculture actually is somewhat infamous for having something like 15 different definitions of rural depending on the program. Those include places under 50,000, places under 15,000, places under 2,500. These are all in statute depending on the program in the U.S. My personal favorite, I like this one.
Smaller.
This is not in statute. One place smaller than the place that I live. The Center for Rural Affairs is located in a town of 850 people. Pretty rural, right? But if you ask the patrons at the local bar what rural is, they tell you it means the people who live outside of our town of 850 people. They're the town people. The rural people live outside of town. The moral of the story is, if you don't have a clear definition of rural, don't worry, you're not alone. Before we move on, though, I will add one thing we see in our region, and I think you see here too, that's related to this. And that is that we see regional population centers, those places between 25,000 and 50,000 in population, are doing quite well. And we see a gap opening between these rural places and the smaller places that exist in the trade centers around these regional centers. And that's troubling to me because right now in planning circles, and Jonathan just referenced this, the hot new trend is regional planning centered around these regional trade centers. But we're concerned because we often see in these circumstances that the trade centers, the places with 25,000 to 50,000 in population, are reaping most of the benefit of these regional strategies, while the smaller places, the more rural places, get left out. I don't have a proposal on how to solve that, but I don't think it can be ignored when we discuss regional strategies. One thing I'm interested in is regional strategies that knit like-sized places together as one possible approach. Second question, why does rural matter? Why are we here?
Because we want to be.
Because we want to be.
Because the urbans don't matter without us.
One at a time.
Life's better in rural.
Life's better. Passion.
Food.
Food.
Water.
Family.
Water. Family. Nature. Good. Good answers. I would say, quite simply, because people matter. That was reflected in a lot of your answers. Rural matters because people matter. At the Center for Rural Affairs, we believe that no matter where you live, you should have opportunity. Opportunity to go to school in the community you grew up in. Opportunity to thrive in your vocation. Opportunity to grow old in the place you call home. We're not content to let large swaths of our country turn into ghettos or government-sanctioned disinvestment zones. For us, this is why rural matters. All right, with those two things in the backdrop, what is rural? Why does it matter? Now I'll move on to talk about what I was asked to talk about here today. Gordon asked us to talk about our three organizations, what we do, why we do it, how we do it. I'm going to do that in a way that I hope might be stimulating to you as you think about your own work in your own communities. As I talk, you might think about how is this work similar to what you do? How is this work different? And what strategies or ideas might you steal from how we do things and infuse into your own work? I'll define success here today by how many ideas you steal from me. So, don't hold back. Looking forward to your questions. Hopefully we'll have time at the end. If anybody has a clarifying question as we go and you just want to raise your hand, shout it out. Happy to do that as well. Okay, let's talk about the Center for Rural Affairs. I'm going to hit on our mission, our history, our major activities, and then I'll provide some more reflective comments at the end. The Center's mission is quite simple. It's to create vibrant rural communities. I'll unpack how we go about that here today. And I'm also going to come back to some thoughts on that word, vibrant. What does that mean? As I talk, maybe you can think about what that means to you. What does it mean to create vibrant communities? First, a bit on our history. I guess I was credited in the intro with being one of the oldest rural development organizations in the U.S. That might be true. Don't think I wrote that. There are some that are older, but we're probably among the oldest. The center was founded over 40 years ago. At the time, our founders were working in a local government-funded anti-poverty organization. And our two founders, Marty Strange and Don Ralston, both in that picture there, they decided they couldn't accomplish enough and they couldn't get at the root of poverty and development needs in rural places unless they also worked on policy change. So a snippet from a video from our former executive director talking about what he perceived as some of our most significant moments in the center's history. Brian, could you play that?
I think there were quite a number of pivotal moments. You know, the 1980s and the 1980s farm crisis were really a pivotal time for the center because it elevated the issue of family farming, and we quickly became one of the leading organizations in the country addressing the issues affecting family farming. Without a doubt, one of the key moments in the history of the Center for Rural Affairs was 1982 when we joined with other organizations and farmers and rural people across Nebraska to pass our anti-corporate farm constitutional amendment. We've been outspent, depending on how you count, by about 10-1 by corporate farming interests, and we beat them. And it was a real testament to what happens when people of conscience join together to go to work, to take control of their own destiny. Around 1990 was an important time because that's when we realized that if we were committed to building genuine opportunity for all rural people and a future in their communities, we need to keep addressing agriculture, but we need to do more. And so it's when we launched our, what's now called our REAP program, that provides loans and training, business planning assistance to help people start small micro businesses in rural areas.
Marty and Don, our two co-founders, also wanted to work beyond the local community, which brings me to where do we work. We work intensively in Nebraska, where you heard our home office is and where most of our staff are located. We have a strong presence throughout the Midwest and Plains, those states in orange there. And then we have national reach with donors and activists in all 50 states. In the slide, you see the 3 states in red, and that's where we have staff: Nebraska, Montana, and Iowa. And I sort of call the region around it our base state region. We're rooted deeply in our region. It's what we know best. But we see similarities with other regions. And to win federal policy changes, we realized decades ago that we had to deepen relationships with organizations all across the country. Our home region, the Midwest, is characterized by a shift away from agriculture and a shift away from manufacturing as the base economy. So some similarities to this region. And this has driven declines in rural population for decades. Most of the communities that we work in saw peak populations 70 to 100 years ago. And since then have seen population declines as much as 10% per decade, decade after decade after decade. This of course puts pressure on schools, hospitals, government services, all things I believe you see here in British Columbia and across Canada too. Here's some comparative geography. This is British Columbia overlaid with the Midwest, where I work, at scale. Also, the population of British Columbia is about 4.6 million, I believe. Is that right? And the population of the 5 states that it overlays there has a population of about 9.3 million. Before I talk about the major activities of the Center for Rural Affairs, there's a concept I've been pondering lately, and I want to share it with you. I've heard some of it here already this morning. It's easy to paint all rural places with one broad brushstroke, and often we see all rural places described in what we call at the center as a crisis frame. It's that way of talking about rural places as if rural is equal to decline. It simply isn't true, and certainly isn't helpful. The reality is that rural places are complicated and full of paradoxes, right? Take 2 examples. Our built infrastructure in many of our communities is in decline, yet you cannot get a contractor to do a job because they all have more work than they need. Much of it new construction, you can relate. Or 2, there's no question that there are fewer businesses on Main Street today than there were 50 years ago, yet we see exploding demand for small business investment capital in our towns. These are paradoxes of the places we live. The reality is that small towns and rural places are spiking. Some places are doing well, while other places are struggling. And in every community, there's a mix of challenges and opportunities. And I sum that up as rural. It's complicated. Now let's talk about the center's major activities. You can think about the center's work in 4 big buckets. Number 1, and our largest area of work, is our small business development. We do training and make loans to rural entrepreneurs who cannot access traditional credit. We focus on businesses with 10 or fewer employees and loans of $50,000 or less. And we've lent $12 million to date. Our lending work grew out of research that we did on employment trends in the rural Great Plains in the late 1980s following the farm crisis. And we found a direct correlation. As places become more rural, rates of self-employment and rates of employment in small business rise. And so we identified small business development as a leverage point for building opportunity. Today we also run 2 specific efforts, one focused on women's business development and a second on Hispanic business development. Our small business work is statewide in Nebraska with 10 staff working all across the state. And I think it's important to note, in addition to lending, we also run robust training, technical assistance programs for business owners. And that's one of the things that makes our work, sets our work apart from some organizations, and also the statewide coverage. No matter where you live in Nebraska, you have access to a full service of business training, technical assistance, and lending. And then also our volume. For a micro lender, we're pretty large. We're among the top 10 small business administration micro lenders in the nation, and the only rural one on that list. We've lent $12 million total to date. We have about $4 million outstanding, and the vast majority of that, you can see there, is in smaller loans and to lower income folks. I have another video. This is our small business director explaining our small business work.
Soup and More started with a commercial kitchen in their home and quickly outgrew that operation, needed to expand their business, and a Main Street business building actually in Lyons, Nebraska became available. So they were able to purchase that building with the help of a REAP RMAP loan, RMAP standing for Rural Migrant Entrepreneur Assistance Program loan, which allows for the purchase of real estate. So in this case, they took a neat business concept, they grow the products, they make dehydrated foods out of that product, and that business is just now starting to grow, and we're really excited about it. REAP helps businesses in a number of ways. One is financing. If you need a loan, you can't get a loan at a bank, REAP can possibly help you. If you need help with putting together a business plan for your business, REAP can help you. If you're looking for training with a specific training need for your small business, REAP can help. Soup and More had a pretty detailed business plan already put together. What Soup and More needed was a little bit of guidance, and they needed loan capital.
REAP is the acronym for our small business program, the Rural Enterprise Assistance Program. Moving on from our small business development efforts, the second bucket of work is our work with farmers and ranchers and on food systems development. We work with farmers on farm profitability and farm stewardship practices, as well as training with beginning farmers, and also work on food systems and market development. The third bucket is our work with communities on local development strategies. For instance, in rural Nebraska, we're experiencing an influx of new immigrants into small towns across the state, and we're working with community leaders to make these communities more welcoming to newcomers and to capture that vibrancy that can spring from a melding of cultures. Here you see a picture of what we call a Main Street living room. And it's just that. It's a living room on Main Street. It is neat. It's a tool we use to draw out conversation about a topic, any given topic. You can use this in your own community. It has a really, when you set up couches on Main Street, you have to do it on Main Street. This is in parking areas in our hometown on the side of Main Street. When you set up couches and a coffee table, it really grabs people's attention. They want to come over, they want to see what you're doing. It's an inviting space. And they come over and you say, hey, we're here to talk today about, what are some of the key cultural attractions of this area? What do you think? It's a great way to get community input. You can steal that idea. Finally, last, certainly not least, we're most well known outside of Nebraska for our policy analysis and advocacy work. We have grassroots advocates in all 50 states, and our staff in Montana and Iowa that I mentioned earlier, those are policy organizers. That's why they're there. We work on farm policy, small business policy, healthcare policy, and energy policy. I'm going to talk in more detail about our policy work tomorrow, so I won't go into depth here. Those are our 4 buckets of major work: small business, farm, ranch, and food systems development, community development, and policy advocacy. So what are some challenges and opportunities we see ahead? By no means a complete list, but here are 4 quick ones. 1, we see the need and an opportunity to stem the loss of employment in the farm and natural resource sector through training, new market development, and through policy change. 2, we see the need for dramatically more investment capital for small business and venture development, a theme we've already heard echoed here today. 3, we're looking at strategies to reinvigorate cooperative and worker-owned enterprise development, to put the people who are rooted in place back in control of the means of production. And 4, in our region, I'm not sure how applicable it is here with your large hydro load, but in our region there's quite a bit of opportunity in clean energy development for our small communities. So those are 4 examples of places where we see opportunity to leverage going forward. How do we fund all of this work? I wouldn't normally dive into this, but since I was asked to talk about our organization, here it is. About $4 million is the overall budget. 40% of that comes from state and federal contracts. Most of that is our small business development work and our work with beginning farmers and some conservation work. That includes our Federal Small Business Development Administration, our Federal Department of Agriculture, and our State Department of Economic Development. And then about 40% comes from private foundations. These range from family foundations and state-based private foundations all the way to national foundations such as Kellogg, Mott, Ford Foundation, major players you may have heard of. And then 20% comes from grassroots individuals and earned income. Okay, told you about the center, our mission, our major activities. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. I think watching the clock, though, I will move on. Gordon asked me to touch on how what we do relates to other organizations working at the community level. And it's a great question. I'll provide 2 examples. Perhaps we can explore it more in question and answer later. First is our policy advocacy, and I think that's one of the places we see some of the greatest leverage and differentiation of what we do from community-based organizations. And we have close relationships with many of the local community-based organizations. We run a robust policy analysis and advocacy program, and they, the community-based organizations, usually do not. And so we're able to leverage our relationship with local groups to get them engaged in the policy fights at both the state and federal level. Our theory of change up here relates to this, and it is that rural people can gain control over their own destiny by working locally in their own community, but also then by banding together to work on common issues at the State House and in Washington. And we believe really that both of these pieces are critical to creating change in rural communities, both the local development effort and then also the broader policy change on the other. Again, I'll go into this in more depth and provide an example of it tomorrow when I talk about our policy work. And then secondly would be a difference on the small business development side of our work comparing the center to local organizations. And that would be both the volume and number of loans that we move compared to local organizations, and also that we offer our small business clients a full suite of training and technical assistance services in addition to lending. And sometimes that also allows us to work with a community-based organization, maybe that does have some loan services, loan funds, but doesn't offer training or technical assistance, and we can partner in that way. And then finally, we recently created a subsidiary entity that is certified as a Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI, which is a federal treasury designation. And that will allow us to leverage even more capital into the communities we work in and serve as a complement to local organizations that don't have access to those sources of capital. So those would be a couple of things that set us apart from local development organizations. All right. I asked you at the outset to think about what it means to create vibrant rural communities. Your turn again. What does that word vibrant mean to you? would like to pause it for you to mull over, and maybe I'll pick it up here from my slide already. We often talk about communities and community success in what I call a growth mindset. It's rooted in capitalism. We think a town is successful if it is growing and unsuccessful if it is shrinking. And I'd like to suggest that we replace that growth mindset with a vibrancy mindset. Whether a town is successful or a good place to live is more about how vibrant it is and not about what size it is. The hard truth of the matter is that most of the places where we work, in our part of the country at least, are not going to grow in population. But that does not mean that they can't be vibrant places to live. So by changing our frame around growth and vibrancy, it can lead us to think about new models to sustain vibrancy even as populations shrink. For instance, we might ask, what policies or tools do we need to maintain schools and hospitals or grocery stores and post offices, even in places that are not as big as they once were? And that could lead us to some examples, such as telemedicine to create e-pharmacy services in small towns that don't have a pharmacist or drugstore, or cooperative community ownership of local grocery stores to maintain those critical services that contribute to vibrancy, even though a place is smaller than it once was. I'll wrap up now to add a little flair. Here's another video clip with some of our staff summarizing what they do.
We help businesses achieve success, and we do that on a daily basis.
Our work at the Center for Rural Affairs is really about breaking down those barriers for beginning farmers and ranchers so that they can get started and then be successful.
Energy could bring a lot of opportunity to rural America, but in order to take advantage of that opportunity, we need to develop the right kind of energy and do it in the right way.
The Center for Rural Affairs works on healthcare because health insurance has become increasingly more expensive, and small businesses and entrepreneurs are the job creators in rural communities.
Everything that we do, our work with farmers and small businesses, healthcare, and energy policy, it's all connected by our belief that communities are strongest when individuals have the chance to earn a living and shape the future of their towns and of our country.
I think one of the things the Center does effectively is really help build advocates, engaging them in the decisions that are affecting their lives and their communities.
Those are all longer clips. I edited them down for you. They end more gracefully than they did in the slideshow. All right, I will wrap up for now. I hope you have a sense of the Center for Rural Affairs, what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. I will be around for the duration of the conference, so come find me.